Donald Trump's takeover of Venezuela's oil economy has begun.
We're going to take back the oil that, frankly, we should have taken back a long time ago.
In the days after the U.S. military infiltrated the country, captured its president, and forced him to face criminal charges, the U.S. has seized 2 more oil tankers, allegedly carrying sanctioned oil. One of them was Russian.
This Russian-flagged tanker was seized south of Iceland after a cat-and-mouse chase lasting more than 2 weeks.
Just one night before we got that news, Trump posts on Truth Social that Venezuela will turn over up to 50 million barrels of oil to the United States. That would be about 2 months' worth of exports from that country. As for the rest, the U.S. Energy Secretary says the U.S. will control the sale of Venezuelan oil on world markets indefinitely.
But have those sales done by the U.S. government and deposited into accounts controlled by the U.S. government.
When I call this a takeover of Venezuela's oil economy, we're really talking about its entire export economy. Oil is virtually all of Venezuela's outgoing trade, about 95%. But for any of this to actually create the outcome Trump wants,
we have the greatest oil companies in the world going and invest billions and billions of dollars.
The U.S. would have to overcome a series of challenges cemented by 100 years of history. There's a reason Venezuela has more oil than any other country on Earth, but isn't even in the top 20 of exporters. Let me show you why.
We built Venezuela oil industry with American talent, drive, and skill, and the socialist regime stole it from us.
Trump's claim of stolen American oil is incomplete, but it is the first challenge that would give any American oil company pause, because if Venezuela stole American assets once, why wouldn't they do it again?
This constituted one of the largest thefts of American property in the history of our country.
For 100 years, American companies have been extracting oil in Venezuela in exchange for a cut of the profits. 15% off the top wasn't too hard to swallow when, by the late 1920s, Venezuela was producing more oil than every other country in the world except the United States. But fast forward to the 1960s, when Venezuela becomes a founding member of OPEC, and the price of doing business in the country means handing over 65% of profits.
In forming OPEC, the producing countries resolved to protect their own national interests, become a new player in the oil game.
Venezuela wanted more of its natural resources to be returned to them in the form of revenue. That's what we see in a lot of oil-producing countries. Revenue from oil is extreme enough, and in Venezuela's case as well, simply the administration wanting a larger piece of what private companies were taking out of Venezuela.
By this time, successive authoritarian governments have wrestled more and more control of oil production away from foreign companies and into the domestic state-owned apparatus. By the 1970s, ironically, at a time when you've got more American refineries than ever purpose-built to process the specific type of oil you find in Venezuela, you also get this major push from the Venezuelan government to revoke American rights and take control of oil infrastructure.
The most important fact about Venezuela's oil is that it's now completely Venezuelan. The industry was dominated by foreign companies, but the state took over in January 1976.
So late President Chavez seized that kind of environment, the competition, the strong competition, and changed the rules in Venezuela, but in a way that gave more power to the state-owned companies, which is PDVSA, and put extra burden on the international investors, financial burden, fiscal burden. He took over some of their assets, at least a big share of those assets. And therefore, for companies, it did not make any more sense to stay in the country.
There are exceptions, of course, and American companies still, at this time, managed to find a way to do business. But jump ahead to 2006, when foreign oil companies are ordered to cede majority control to the state. They refuse these new terms. And in 2007, companies like ExxonMobil and ConocoPhillips have their oil projects expropriated and they leave the country. Together, these two companies say they're owed billions of dollars. And in 2019, a World Bank tribunal orders Venezuela to pay ConocoPhillips around $8 billion US. That money has yet to be paid. So if you're an oil company today evaluating a country whose 100-year track record has been thrown into upheaval by circumstances that change by the day, how much risk are you eager to take here?
There are other uses of that dollar, that investment dollar. There's Suriname, there's Guyana, there's Brazil, there's the Permian, there's Canada, there's offshore Africa.
There's nothing wrong with risk so long as the payout makes the risk worth it. Problem with oil these days is that the price of a barrel has been dropping, down more than 25% in just the last year alone. Expand your view out to the high of about 3.5 years ago, the price of oil has been slashed by about half in that time. A company like Chevron could still make a profit at that price point, but the kind of greenfield investment that would be required to bring Venezuela's known reserves up from underground and then out to world markets, that becomes harder and harder to justify as the value of oil goes down.
We're talking there about tens of billions of dollars of core infrastructure investment to get back to the 3 to 4 million barrels a day, which is the height of what we saw in Venezuela.
And there's no simpler example I can give you of why this is so than just looking at the type of oil Venezuela itself has to offer. Extra heavy crude is what it sounds like. It's extremely thick and flows like peanut butter, as in it doesn't, unless you force it to. For example, by superheating it so it becomes more liquidy, or by diluting it with other chemicals that flow better.
Venezuela's oil reserves are the opposite of champagne. Think of like cold molasses.
Either way, in Venezuela, odds are you're not just turning a valve and oil flows like a fountain. These can be multi-billion-dollar projects with long payback periods. And even this is only part of the financial problem, because what just about every expert will tell you is that the upstream infrastructure required to support oil extraction is a complete mess. Venezuela has struggled with an energy crisis for years under the current regime. Water shortages and cuts to the supply are chronic and devastating. And this is how one news report described one of Venezuela's most significant oil fields: leaks, rusted pipes, pieces of broken equipment scattered about, and staircases leading to nowhere. There's no question, this is a country whose central problem isn't oil itself, it's how to move it.
We know we have the volumes, but at what cost? The existing infrastructure is old, is run down. It needs rehabilitation. Yeah, it needs modernization. What about the refining, the transportation, the pipeline?
Power grids, probably roads, ports, storage facilities.
I mean, all sorts of legislations, regulations. Then you have to look at other rules in the country. So it's really like a massive overhaul of the institutional framework.
Venezuela's oil production today is about a third of what it was in its heyday back in the 90s. And energy think tanks have estimated it would cost tens of billions of dollars over the next 15 years just to maintain that low output, given how mismanagement, corruption, and deterioration have left the industry in shambles. So here's one more question worth asking. Ultimately, the allure of Venezuela's oil industry is in the strength of its reserves. At 300 billion barrels of oil beneath the earth, more than what Iraq, Russia, the US, and China have combined, the theoretical ceiling of Venezuela's oil output is ridiculously high. They've got the chest full of treasure. It's just that what Venezuela hasn't had for the longest time is the stability required to unlock it.
A government can change, and despite all the money you've spent, they can just say, you're out of here. It could be more subtle. It could be a government coming in and saying, I know we made a contract with you. We agreed to a concession and to a revenue split and this and that, but we think that's unfair now. That's part of what the oil industry calls above ground risk, that policy or politics may change.
Maduro's been captured, but still a lot of his loyalists remain in Venezuela. Will the regime that is currently in power in Venezuela view the U.S. differently than Maduro did?
Now, there's a lot we don't know about what exactly the Trump administration has in store for Venezuela, except that whatever it is, it rates exceptionally high on ambition.
We're going to have our very large United States oil companies, the biggest anywhere in the world, go in, spend billions of dollars, fix the badly broken infrastructure, the oil infrastructure, and start making money for the country.
And lower on details.
I won't get ahead of the plans that the president and his team are currently speaking with the interim authorities about, but rest assured, there is a long-term plan here.
And once we get that plan, the details will absolutely matter, because nobody's arguing the US government isn't capable of backstopping, or at least incentivizing, an American oil industry in Venezuela, even a very risky one. And what the US would argue right now is that Venezuela's outlook has never looked better than it does now. So if you're betting on possibility and potential, it's there.
It has enormous potential. Until a couple decades ago, it had a very powerful history and a successful history.
But there are challenges too, and a messy American track record, where even regime change in a major oil producer doesn't often, or maybe even ever, lead to a rapid, long-standing increase in oil output. And if confidence in the operating environment decades into the future is what oil companies need to succeed on shaky ground, we've yet to see it in Venezuela.